welcome to The Conversation on News Central Television. This is the program where we bring you up to date with all the political happenings on the African continent. I am Gbenga, Aborowa.
And I'm Rita, Omodia. Today on The Conversation, we'll kickstart by looking at South Africa's growing pressure after refusing to release cargo documents relating to the Russian ship.
Now, so the program today, we will look at the situation in Kenya as President William Ruto issues stern warnings to cabinet secretaries after the corruption allegation leveled against the Principal Secretary of Public Health, Josephine Mburu. Interesting things happening on the continent. I'd like to start with a bit of good news as this current administration of President Muhammad Buhari winds down. It's in its twilight, and in less than 72 hours we'll have a new president. And talking about the good news, Nigeria Air just landed in the Federal Capital Territory of Abuja. So I hope it does disrupt the travel market, because as we speak, air travel is very expensive, domestic air travel, to say the least. Yeah.
I share the same reasoning with you. I mean, this is supposed to be our own product. This is Nigeria Air, something that we are proud of. And I'm sure this has put a lot of limelight on President Muhammad Buhari's administration. After about 8 years, things he can do. We talk about the Dangote refinery, talk about the second Niger bridge. We also talk about lots of things that he has done as he's winding down his administration for the Nigerian Air. We have lots of issues with the air transportation system. So we're hoping that with Nigerian Air, there will be lots of benefits for Nigeria.
Indeed. And just to mention, it's in partnership with Ethiopia Air, which seems to be one of the most successful African airlines in the business. So we can tap into that success. And I'm sure you've also noticed the flurry of activities around the last days of Mr. President.
Yes.
I guess it's just to put his name on these things for posterity record, to say, you know, I commissioned this. It was under my administration that Nigeria Air came.
But the question is, why wait for this last dying minute? I mean, we had 8 years.
Exactly.
Why not have done this since?
I wish we had a commission galore from 2015 to 20.
So you just wait for like days before your administration ends, and then we're seeing commissioning all over. But it's still a good one for Nigeria. We do hope that there'll be proper management for it, not that at the end we start hearing stories.
And like Nigeria Airways in the past. Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not.
Congratulations, Nigeria, on that. But we begin in South Africa, where the government is facing pressure to release cargo documents related to a Russian ship accused by the United States of transporting weapons for Moscow. A top official from the ruling African National Congress expressed support for a visit by President Putin despite his indictment by the International Criminal Court. The ANC stance raises concerns about South Africa's relationship with Russia and its impact on Western partnerships.
The U.S. ambassador accused South Africa of providing weapons to Russia, but the government denies involvement. The opposition party called for transparency, but the government refused to release the cargo manifest. The situation highlights tensions and uncertainties surrounding South Africa's ties to Russia. And joining us for this conversation, we have Themba Godi, President, African People's Convention. He joins us from Bushbuckridge in South Africa. We also have Mpuzi Mdikazi, Director of International Relations, Lindiwe Sisulu Foundation. He joins us from Cape Town, also in South Africa. Gentlemen, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you.
And I'm going to begin with Lindiwe. Thanks for having us. Thanks for being on the program. I'll begin with Lindiwe. Could you provide a detailed analysis of the recent pressure faced by the South African government concerning its refusal to release cargo documents related to the Russian ship? And what do you think are the potential implications of this controversy? Because we've seen lots of pressure starting from the U.S. ambassador's allegations on South Africa. And now we're seeing this one saying that he's not releasing documents. What are the potential implications of all this controversy?
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. First of all, my name is Mpuzi Mdikazi. I represent the Lindiwe Sisulu Foundation. I am not Lindiwe Sisulu.
All right, apologies.
Secondly, I'm not sure whether I'm audible enough, but I am not sure if we're to put things into proper perspective, if the question is a correct question, because one, the debate from the U.S. Embassy is a false debate. It's a false narrative. It doesn't exist from where I'm sitting. It's one of those ludicrous assertions to have been made. I mean, the US Defense Force knows what ammunition South Africa can produce. They know too what quantities are produced. They know the processes that is followed. It's a most baffling accusation. So for us, the debate doesn't exist. It's a force. It's one of those diversionary tactics they normally take when maybe they are faced with some gesticulating signals of panic. If not, maybe because they want some reason to hold South Africa or to throw sanctions to South Africa because of its non-alignment position, which I think is frustrating for them. Because they may be connoting that they've got South Africa in, they've got a total control of South Africa, which the reality is not proving to be the case because of a number of interesting developments globally. If I can mention the BRICS element, for instance, the West is really frustrated by this emerging global alternative bloc in the form of BRICS, which South Africa is part of. So you'll recall that these are some of the tactics they have done when they wanted to invade Iraq, when they eliminated Saddam Hussein, on a false premise, that there was the weapons of mass destruction, which the legitimate authorities couldn't find ultimately, and strangely, there was no recourse on that. So the assertions of the ambassador from the US were I think were misdirected. And you'll ask yourself, under normal circumstances, if an ambassador will make such an assertion, why is it not demarched by our government? And why is it not been recalled by the American government? That's scenario one. Scenario two, you'll find out that if I can just go back, this country has got what we call National Arms Control Committee, which was established during this committee was established just to look at the sales and the regulation of arms from our countries, So
okay, but
to say,
Mfuzi, we'll get into more details later, but I would like to bring in Themba Godi at this point in time. Now, Themba, earlier this week I spoke to South Africa's Foreign Minister, Dr. Naledi Pandor, and she did clarify South Africa's position on the war in Ukraine. She said South Africa remains neutral and looks toward peace between Ukraine and Russia. Now, the African National Congress Secretary General, Fikile Mbalula, has expressed the party's willingness to welcome a visit by President Vladimir Putin, who has an ICC arrest warrant on him. Now, in your expert opinion, how does this statement impact South Africa's international relations and its position within the BRICS economic bloc? And is it not in opposite ends to what Dr. Naledi Pandor told me about South Africa's neutrality? Contradiction.
Well, thanks very much. I think, look, South Africa has adopted, like many African countries, a position of neutrality in relation to the Ukraine-Russia crisis. And this neutrality, as coined by Kwame Nkrumah, is positive neutrality, meaning that South Africa is a friend to all and an enemy to none. But as usual, the Americans and the Europeans want a scenario wherein their enemy should be everybody's enemy. And this position, which our Foreign Affairs Minister stated in the face of the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, when he came to South Africa, has not sat down well with the Western world. And I think, as you know, we're going to have a BRICS summit very soon, where it is where it is expected that the president of Russia will attend. And it does appear that South Africa, faced with popular sentiment in the country, will not deny Putin the right to come. And so the geopolitics, therefore, the usual blackmail of the Americans and the pressure comes in many forms. And I think that this issue around the Russian ship is part of the pressurizing tools that are being applied on South Africa.
Now, Themba, I'm going to stay with you for a bit because while these allegations came on, these assertions, no matter the scenarios we're seeing here, we're seeing the South African government talking about an inquiry into all of this. So shouldn't we wait for this to be done before there are conclusions surrounding this particular issue?
Look, I think by agreeing to set up an inquiry, South African government was trying to be diplomatic and to bend over to the Americans. Because in the first instance, the sanctions that the Americans are talking about are their own unilateral sanctions that are illegal in terms of international law. So, but however, the Americans and the Europeans believe that if they sanction anybody, then it is God's injunction that everybody should follow. So in the first instance, we are not bound by those sanctions. But secondly, there have been discussions around this issue between the Americans and the South African government. And somebody said in one of the American media outlets that the Americans said the evidence they have, they will only give them to a credible institution. Now, does that imply that they see the South African government as being, without credibility? And if so, then what becomes the basis of engagement? Or is it that the Americans merely want to dictate and there's no engagement? So I think South Africa saying we'll set up a commission, it's really to bend backwards over to accommodate the Americans to say, well, if you have any evidence, bring it there, let it be seen. If it's not there, then the story lies. But I do believe it's more geopolitics than facts.
Thank you very much, Themba. I'd like to bring back Mpunzi to the conversation. Now, President Putin has been indicted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes. How does South Africa's potential acceptance of his visit for the BRICS summit align with its obligation as a signatory of the ICC treaty, the Rome Statute?
Look, am I audible enough?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Yeah. South Africa is a sovereign state that has made its position very, very clear from the Mandela day, from the Mandela era, that no one will determine who should be our friend. That includes the US and the UK. Now, the popular sentiment that is coming from the ground is that President Putin will be visiting South Africa and will be accepted and will be greatly welcomed in the country. Why? Because many in our country, they view ICC as an extension of the Western interest, where mainly they only target those who are opposed to their agenda. Just take one example, for instance. Not so long time ago, I'm sorry to be an echo chamber on this one.
Yeah.
Tony Blair just made a concession that, look, we were wrong. We were wrong on Iran, on Iraq. And look at such an expensive experiment. And yet there are no consequences from the ICC.
Now, Mpusi, these allegations are there. Sorry,
similar vein.
Sorry to cut you short, Mpusi. These allegations have been there about the ICC not being fair or being biased in its treatment when you talk about African issues. And that's why we had a situation where the ANC government talked about withdrawing from the ICC. But we saw information that they had withdrawn the position, they rescinded the position to withdraw from the ICC, which means that South Africa is still bound to the Roman Statute. So it's not really about friendship, it's about the obligations to the Roman Statute. So is South Africa not going to oblige with what they have signed with the ICC? What exactly is the position of South Africa when it comes to that? Because there's an obligation to the Roman statutes. It's not just about friendship.
It's not only an obligation, there are also alternatives.
And what are the alternatives?
How do we... Yes, alternative is that we can... the summit can be taken to another country. I'm making an example here. Another example is that we can have a virtual summit in August, a BRICS summit in August. However, there's a precedent here of President al-Bashir, the Sudanese former president, which the very same ICC issued a warrant of arrest, and when he was about to visit our country. Now, you'll find out that every time there's somebody that the West is not in line with, they will use what Utemba is raising. They will use all sorts of pressures, you understand, to make it a point that South Africa responds to whatever demands, whether it's a blackmail or not. In this case, South Africa has weighed its options.
Okay, thank you, Mbuzi. South Africa does have to weigh its options. Now, Themba, how significant is the BRICS summit in South Africa? I mean, and what factors contribute to the ANC's desire to even have this man, Russian President Vladimir Putin, present at the event? What are the potential outcomes and implications of his attendance? I mean, Mbuzi just said an alternative is to, have another country host it. So why is it important for South Africa to host this BRICS summit?
Yeah, I think that a virtual summit is a non-starter, although theoretically yes, but practically no. South Africa would lose face internationally if it were to bend down to the dictates of the West. It is very important for South Africa and for Africa to have the two most powerful leaders in our continent and in our country, and for us to be hosting.
Yeah, but sorry to interrupt you there, Themba. You said South Africa might lose face if they back down and don't allow Russian President Vladimir Putin to visit. But South Africa does a lot of business with the United States, one of its top business partners. It could also lose face in that regard, with people saying, you're inviting Russia that has been treated like a pariah state, and they might consider it a tacit support for Russia in the war against Ukraine. So it's quite an interesting geopolitical balancing act.
No, it's a very simple and straightforward one. I know there's the AGOA carrot that is being dangled before us, that it's up for renewal next year, and if we don't play along, it might not be renewed. Well, that is what is currently. But what is the future trajectory? The future trajectory does not point to America or to Europe. It actually points towards Asia, towards Africa, towards Latin America. I think that as things stand, with the emerging multipolar world, which will allow countries like South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, the countries of Africa, the policy space to decide their own developmental trajectory. We cannot sacrifice the emergence of a multipolar world because currently there is economic blackmail from the Americans. The future that we want is a future where we want the Americans and the Europeans to leave us alone as Africa. Yes, they've stolen over 400 years of wealth. They may as well keep it. But if they can leave us alone and give us the space to decide on our own development, it will be great for us. And I think China and Russia offers us that opportunity.
Okay, thank you so much, Themba. I'm going to bring in Mpuzi into this conversation because from your analysis, since South Africa is not willing to sacrifice the friendship of Russia for anything, but how do you think this will imply with the relationship with the United States of America on the other sides and with other Western powers? How do you see this playing out?
You see, I am aligned to what Themba is saying. Africa is the mother of all continents. By that I mean, we've got everything in Africa, which maybe, and on many occasions, and in many instances, America is after these resources. And Europe is also after these resources. This is a pushback to this Berlin conference. If you look at it from a different angle, this is a pushback from this Berlin conference where all this evilness in our continent was decided upon. So this BRICS bloc alternative is giving us an opportunity as South Africa to ensure that at least we deepen what I would call self-determination. We deepen that kind of a dialogue as South Africans. But as things stand, I don't think that we should worry about Americans, because Americans, at any rate, I am not sure if they've got our interest at heart. They've never show me one country where America has been involved and there's democracy. You'll never see any. Instead, you will see casualties. Go to Libya, for instance.
Mpuzi,
go to Iran.
Do you believe that Russia has the interest of South Africa at heart and not just for its own personal gains?
Yeah, history doesn't lie. History tells us that Russia, unlike the West, the Western countries, Russia has never colonized us. Why can't we trust them now? Russia have never colonized us. Instead, they've enabled our comrades. They've trained our comrades militarily, and they've given our comrades intelligence training. They've assisted us during those days, very, very, very dark days of apartheid. So why all of a sudden we're going to turn our back against Russia because somebody is dangling a carrot, an illegal carrot?
Okay.
Thank
you, Mpuzi. I'd like Themba to have the last say before we wrap up a conversation in this segment. Now, Themba, in your assessment, what are the key considerations for the South African government and its international partners in navigating the current situation with Russia? How can they strike a balance between maintaining diplomatic relations and also upholding international obligations and accountability?
Yeah, well, I think the choice facing South Africa is to do what is in the best interest of the country, which is that it should not allow itself to be used in the geopolitics that are unfolding. We are not convinced that the indictment by the ICC has been taken purely as a legal consideration. We believe that it has been taken as a political tool and must be treated as such. And I think that time is long past when we think that we need America more than it needs us. America needs us now more than we need them, because they know if they turn their back on us, the Iranians, the Russians, the Chinese are there to welcome us with open arms. And so it is with many other countries in the South. In fact, the Americans themselves conceded a few weeks back that actually countries of the global South are more sympathetic to Russia than buying the narrative from the North. So I think that South Africa cannot allow itself to be seen to be weak, to be bullied and pushed around. It must stand for what it believes is right, and it has the support of the overwhelming majority in this country who know Russia from the past as having helped us in fighting colonialism. And Russia has declared many times that it wants to help Africa to overcome neocolonialism. So why should we turn our back on a country that wants to free us from the domination of the West?
All right, definitely lots of arguments concerning this particular issue. We'll definitely be following up with this conversation. Thank you so much, Themba Godi, President, African People's Convention, and also Mpuzi Mdekazi, Director of International Relations at Lindiwe Sisulu Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us in this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll take a quick break right now. When we come back, we'll move gears to Kenya, where the president has warned the cabinet against corruption, and he said they will be following full consequences if they are found guilty of corruption. We'll have details after this break. Stay with us.